He called me trash in front of Florida's elite, expecting me to apologize for my existence. He did not realize I had already acquired the distressed debt that kept his lights on. When he shoved me away from his table, he inadvertently pushed himself into a hostile takeover. By Monday afternoon, the billionaire who treated me like a servant was shaking as he signed his resignation letter, realizing too late that he had just been fired by the trash. My name is Addison Watson, and until 7:45 this evening, I believed that love could bridge the gap between a girl who grew up on food stamps and a family that owned half the power grid on the eastern seaboard. I was wrong. The air inside the dining room of the Kingswell estate on Jupiter Island was not just cold, it was chemically preserved, chilled to a temperature that kept the orchids crisp and the heavy cream from separating. It was a temperature that money bought to keep the humid Florida reality at bay. I sat halfway down the mahogany table, a piece of furniture so long it required its own zip code. The table was set with enough silverware to perform a major surgery, and the crystal glasses caught the light of the chandelier in a way that almost hurt the eyes. Around me sat the titans of industry. To my left was a senator who had been in office since before I was born. To my right was a hedge fund manager who had shorted the housing market in 2008 and made $1 billion while families lost their homes. And at the head of the table sat Harlan Kingswell. Harlan was a man carved out of granite and old prejudices. He was the patriarch of Kingswell Infrastructure, a conglomerate that built dams, power plants, and grids. He wore a tuxedo not because it was a gala, but because it was Tuesday. He had been holding court for the last hour, telling a story about a hunting trip in Botswana. But his eyes kept flicking to me. It was not a look of curiosity. It was the look a gardener gives a weed that has somehow sprouted in a prize-winning rosebed. Caleb sat across from me, my fiancé, the man who had proposed to me in a quiet park in Savannah, away from all this. He looked small tonight. He was shrinking into his chair, laughing a little too loud at his father's jokes, drinking his scotch a little too quickly. I tried to catch his eye, to find an anchor in this sea of sharks, but he was studiously examining the rim of his glass. Harlan cleared his throat. The sound was like a gavel striking a sounding block. The room went silent instantly. The senator stopped chewing. The hedge fund manager put down his fork. "You know," Harlan began, his voice smooth and deep, carrying the weight of generational wealth. "We speak often of value, of worth. In business, we calculate it on spreadsheets. In politics, we count it in votes." He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "But in families, specifically families like ours, value is about pedigree. It is about maintaining the purity of the line." My stomach tightened. I knew this speech. I had heard variations of it before, usually veiled in polite metaphors, but tonight felt different. The air was thinner. Harlan turned his head slowly and locked his eyes on mine. "Caleb tells me you run a little tech company. Addison. Something about wires and codes. It is a grid optimization firm." "Harlan," I said, keeping my voice even. "North Glass Systems. We modernize aging infrastructure to prevent catastrophic failures." "Charming," he said, dismissing my life's work with a wave of a manicured hand. "But let us be honest, it is a service job. You service the people who actually own things, people like us." The table was deadly quiet. Caleb shifted in his seat but said nothing. "I have been thinking about this wedding," Harlan continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that reached every corner of the room. "And I realized I cannot allow it. I simply cannot have it." He took a sip of his drink, savoring the cruelty. "You see, Addison, there are two types of people in this world. There are the ones who set the table, and the ones who sit at it. You have done a marvelous job pretending, buying the right dress, learning which fork to use, but you cannot wash off where you came from." He leaned forward, a predator closing in. "You are trash, my dear, and you do not belong at this table." The word hung in the air. Trash. It did not feel like a slap. It felt like a gunshot. I looked at Caleb. This was the moment. This was the scene in the movie where the hero stands up, flips the table, and defends the woman he loves. I watched his face. I saw the conflict in his eyes. I saw his mouth open, just slightly. 1 second passed. 2 seconds passed. 3 seconds. He closed his mouth. He looked down at his plate. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. In that 3-second delay, Caleb Kingswell died to me. He did not die physically, but the man I thought I loved, the man I thought had a spine, evaporated into the conditioned air. He was more afraid of losing his allowance than he was of losing me. I did not cry. I did not scream. I felt a coldness settle over me that was far more chilling than the room temperature. It was the coldness of absolute clarity. I picked up my linen napkin. I folded it once, perfectly in half. Then I folded it again. I placed it on the table, to the left of my untouched plate, lining it up parallel with the table edge. The movement was precise, mechanical, and calm. I looked up at Harlan. He was smiling, waiting for the tears, waiting for the scene where the poor girl runs away sobbing. "Harlan," I said. My voice did not shake. It was steady, resonant, and professional. "You seem to be confused about the definition of value. Trash is something you discard because it has no use. But I think you will find that in the coming weeks, I am the only thing in this room that has any real worth." I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, a harsh sound that made the senator flinch. "Enjoy your dinner," I said. "I hear the veal is excellent, though I suspect it will taste like ash by the time you swallow it." I turned and walked away. The walk from the dining table to the front door was approximately 40 yards. It felt like 40 miles. I could feel their eyes on my back. I walked past a Goya painting that hung in the hallway, a depiction of Saturn devouring his son. It felt appropriate. I walked past the uniformed staff who were staring at the floor, pretending they had not just witnessed a massacre. I walked past the security detail at the front door, big men in dark suits, who looked at me with a mixture of pity and indifference. I pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped out into the Florida night. The humidity hit me like a physical blow, heavy and salt-laden. It smelled of jasmine and money. The valet was waiting. The driveway was a parade of automotive excess. There was a silver Rolls-Royce Phantom, a matte black Lamborghini, 2 Bentleys, and there, tucked shamefully at the end of the line, was my gray sedan. It was a practical car, a reliable car, a car I had bought with my own money I had earned sweating over code and negotiating contracts while people like Harlan slept. Seeing it there, surrounded by millions of dollars of metal, made the word trash echo in my head again. I was reaching for my keys when I heard the footsteps running on the gravel behind me. "Addison, wait!" I did not stop walking. I unlocked my car door. "Addison, please." Caleb grabbed my arm just as I opened the door. I spun around, ripping my arm from his grip. He looked disheveled. His tie was crooked. He looked like a little boy playing dress-up in his father's clothes. "I am so sorry," he stammered, his eyes wide and wet. He didn't mean it. It's the scotch. He's been under a lot of pressure with the bondholders. You know how he gets." I looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time in 3 years, I saw the weakness in his jawline. I saw the fear in his eyes. "He called me trash." "Caleb," I said. "And you said nothing." "I was shocked," he pleaded. "I froze. You know I love you. I'll talk to him in the morning. I'll make him apologize. He's just drunk. We can fix this." "Fix it?" I laughed. A short, sharp sound that had no humor in it. "You think this is a leaky faucet? You think this is a misunderstanding? It is just words. Addison, he is an old man stuck in his ways. Don't throw us away over words." I stepped in close to him. I wanted him to see the complete absence of forgiveness in my eyes. "The problem isn't what he said, Caleb. The problem is what you didn't say. You sat there and watched him dismantle me. And you calculated the cost of defending me against your inheritance, and you chose the money." "That is not fair," he whined. Life isn't fair, I said. If you were a man, you would have walked out that door before I did. But you aren't a man. You are just an extension of his ego. I can change, he begged, reaching for my hand again. I can fix this. I promise. I opened my car door and looked back at him one last time. That defect isn't fixed with words. Caleb. I got in, slammed the door, and started the engine. I did not look in the rearview mirror as I drove away. I did not want to see him standing there, a silhouette of cowardice against the lit facade of his father's empire. I drove fast. I crossed the bridge back to the mainland, the tires humming on the asphalt. My hands were shaking. The adrenaline was dumping into my system now, making my heart hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wanted to pull over and scream. I wanted to cry until my throat bled, but I didn't. Instead, I took a deep breath. 1, 2, 3. I engaged the part of my brain that had built a company from a laptop in a basement to a major player in the energy sector. I stopped feeling and started processing. I began to organize the events of the evening not as a tragedy, but as data. Harlan was arrogant. That was a vulnerability. Harlan thought I was weak. That was an advantage. Kingswell infrastructure was under pressure from bondholders. Caleb had let that slip. That was an opportunity. I began to visualize the balance sheet of Kingswell infrastructure. I knew their numbers. I knew them because my company, Northglass, had been quietly consulting on a sub-project for them for 6 months. I knew they were over-leveraged. I knew their debt-to-equity ratio was approaching a critical failure point. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was 9:15 at night. I glanced at the screen. It was Marisol Trent, my executive assistant. Marisol never called after 8 o'clock unless the building was on fire or we were being sued. I answered on speakerphone. "This better be good, Marisol," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I just ended my engagement, so my tolerance for bad news is currently at 0. "I am sorry, Addison," Marisol said, her voice clipped and professional. "But you told me to alert you immediately if there was any movement from the Kingswell account. Go on." "I just received an email from Harlan Kingswell's executive secretary. They are flagging it as urgent." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "What do they want? An apology?" "No," Marisol said. "They want to move the acquisition meeting up. They don't want to wait until next month to sign the strategic partnership. They want to sign Monday morning, 9 o'clock sharp." A cold, dark laughter bubbled up in my chest. It started low and erupted into the empty car. "He wants to sign Monday?" I asked. "Yes. The email says Harlan wants to lock in the talent before competitors swoop in. He is framing it as a compliment." Of course he was. He had just called me trash to my face, humiliated me, and destroyed my personal life. And now, he wanted to buy my company. He thought I was desperate. He thought I would be so broken by his rejection that I would sign over my life's work just to get back in his good graces. He thought he could buy the trash and turn it into a subordinate. He wanted to own Northglass Systems because we had the technology that could save his crumbling grid. He needed me. He just didn't know how much. "Addison?" Marisol asked. "What should I tell them?" I looked out at the dark road stretching ahead of me. The tears were gone. The shaking had stopped. In their place was a cold, hard resolve, sharp as a diamond cutter. "Tell them yes," I said. "Tell them I will be there Monday morning. Tell them I am looking forward to it." "Okay, I will draft the confirmation." "And Marisol?" "Yes." "Get Gwen Holloway and Derek Sloan on a conference call. Tonight. Wake them up if you have to." "What is the agenda?" "Hostile takeover," I said. "We aren't going to that meeting to sign a partnership. Marisol, we are going to that meeting to fire him." Saturday morning broke over the city not with sunlight, but with the gray, washed-out pallor of exhaustion. The air in the conference room on the 30th floor of Northglass Systems tasted of stale coffee and high-stakes litigation. We had been here for 6 hours. Gwen Holloway, my general counsel, looked at me over the rim of her glasses. She was a woman who treated the law not as a shield, but as a series of tripwires she enjoyed setting for others. However, at this moment, she looked concerned. "You understand what triggering the termination clause means, Addison," Gwen said, tapping her pen on the stack of documents. "We are not just walking away. We are detonating the bridge while we are still standing on it. The penalty fee is $2 million. You are writing Harlan Kingswell a check for $2 million just for the privilege of telling him no." "It is not a penalty, Gwen," I said, staring at the whiteboard where we had mapped out the Kingswell corporate structure. "It is an entrance fee, and it is the best money I will ever spend." I turned to the window. The city was waking up, oblivious to the fact that one of its industrial giants was about to be hamstrung by a woman he considered disposable. "Draft the letter," I commanded, "but I want the wording specific. Do not use the standard boilerplate about market conditions or strategic realignment. I want to be precise." Gwen uncapped her pen. "Dictate, we are withdrawing the letter of intent due to a fundamental discovery of internal risk," I said, my voice flat. "Cite irreconcilable conflict of governance values and material exposure to toxic leadership practices. Put it on the record. I want those words in a legal document that his board of directors will be forced to read." Gwen paused, a small, dangerous smile touching her lips. "Toxic leadership practices. That is going to make the lawyers at Skadden Arps choke on their breakfast." "Let them choke," I said. "Send the wire transfer for the termination fee immediately. I want the money in their account before they have time to threaten to sue us for breach. If we pay, we are free. They cannot force a deal if we have paid the exit toll." While Gwen finalized the legal slaughter, Derek Sloan was working the phones in the corner. Derek was my CFO, a man who viewed money as a theoretical concept that could be weaponized. He had been on the line with our contacts in the distressed debt market since 4 a.m. "Addison," Derek said, covering the microphone of his headset. "I have a hit." I walked over to his station. The screens were filled with bond yield charts and liquidity indexes. "Talk to me," I said. "Capital City Bank," Derek said. "They are holding a massive block of Kingswell senior notes, about $150 million worth. It is a legacy position they have been trying to unwind for months. They are nervous about Kingswell's liquidity crunch, and they want to get it off their books before the quarter ends next week." I nodded. This was it. "Why are they selling now?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. "Because they smell smoke," Derek said. "They don't know where the fire is yet, but they know the temperature is rising. They are willing to sell at 82 cents on the dollar just to clear the exposure." I leaned in, resting my hands on his desk. "Buy it." Derek looked up at me. "All of it?" "Every single cent," I said. "And do it through the blind trust. I do not want the name Northglass or Addison Watson appearing on any transfer documents until the ink is dry. Use the Cayman entity." "Addison," Derek warned, his finger hovering over the execute key. "This drains our acquisition reserve. If you are wrong about their solvency, we are buying garbage. We will be the ones holding the bag." "I am not wrong," I said softly. I walked back to the whiteboard and picked up a red marker. I circled a subsidiary listed under the Kingswell umbrella, K-Tech Grid Solutions, to the outside world, and even to most of Kingswell's investors. This was just a boring maintenance division, but I knew better. 6 months ago, Northglass had been contracted to provide emergency analytics for a substation blowout in Kentucky. It was a Kingswell facility. The official report said it was a weather-related surge, but my sensors had told a different story. The data showed that the equipment had been running at 140% capacity for weeks, overriding safety protocols to meet unrealistic output targets demanded by corporate headquarters. Harlan had ordered the overrides. I had seen the email chains that my team inadvertently scraped during the diagnostic. He had risked a catastrophic explosion to bump the quarterly revenue numbers by 3%. When I tried to flag it, the Kingswell executives had buried my report and paid Northglass a hefty consulting bonus to close the ticket. At the time, I took the money and signed the NDA. thinking it was just standard corporate greed. Now, I realized it was my ammunition. They were sitting on a liability time bomb. If that negligence came to light, their insurance would be voided, and the bonds would default. By owning the debt, I wasn't just an investor, I was the executioner. "Do it, Derek," I said. "Buy the debt." Derek nodded and began speaking rapidly into his headset. "We are taking the whole block. Execution at market, settlement T+2, yes, confirm," as the room buzzed with the sound of millions of dollars changing hands. My personal phone vibrated on the mahogany table. It buzzed against the wood like an angry hornet. It was Caleb. Again. It was his 12th call in the last 8 hours. I stared at the screen. The picture that flashed up was a selfie we had taken in Napa Valley last year. We looked happy. We looked like a team. It felt like looking at a photograph of strangers. I picked up the phone. "Addison!" Caleb's voice was ragged, desperate. "Thank God. Why haven't you been answering? I have been going out of my mind." "I am working." "Caleb," I said. My voice was calm, which seemed to unsettle him more than screaming would have. "Working? It is Saturday. Look, I am outside your apartment. Doorman won't let me up. You need to come down. We need to talk." "I am not at the apartment," I said. "Where are you?" "I'll come to you." "Addison, please. Dad is spiraling. He is furious about the email you sent. He says you are making a mistake that will ruin your career. He says he can blacklist you." I let out a short, dry laugh. "He thinks he can blacklist me? That is quaint." "He is powerful, Addison. You know that. Just come talk to him. Apologize for the tone of the email. Tell him it was a misunderstanding. I can smooth this over. I told him you were just emotional." I closed my eyes. Emotional. The universal label men like Harlan used to dismiss women who inconveniently had a spine. "And what did you tell him about calling me trash? Caleb? Did you tell him that was emotional too?" "I told you. He didn't mean it." Caleb shouted, his voice cracking. "Why are you holding on to that? It is one word. Think about our future. Think about us." "I am thinking about us." "Caleb," I said, "I am thinking about how you sat there and watched me bleed out socially and didn't lift a finger because you were afraid of being cut out of the will. I was protecting our inheritance." "Your inheritance," I corrected. "Not ours, and certainly not mine." "Addison, stop this. I love you. Doesn't that matter?" I looked over at Gwen, who was printing the termination letter. I looked at Derek, who was finalizing the trade that would give me the power to crush Caleb's father. "Here is the rule. Caleb," I said, my voice dropping to a register that was pure steel. "If you are calling me as a man who wants to fix his mistakes, you are about 20 hours too late. And if you are calling me as Harlan Kingswell's son to broker a peace treaty for Daddy, then you are talking to the wrong entity. You are talking to a competitor." "What does that mean?" "It means that if you are his son before you are my man, do not call this number again." I hung up before he could answer. Then I blocked the contact. "It is done," Derek announced from the corner. "The trade is executed. We own the paper, $150 million in senior secured notes. You are officially Kingswell Infrastructure's largest external creditor." "Good," I said. "Now we wait." The wait didn't last long. Sunday passed in a blur of strategy sessions and cold pizza. We built the case. We mapped the covenants. We found the triggers. By the time Monday morning arrived, the war room was covered in charts and timelines. At 6 a.m. on Monday, the story broke. I had leaked it to a contact at the Financial Times late Sunday night. Just the bare facts. No spin. North Glass Systems terminates merger. Talks with Kingswell Infrastructure. Cites governance concerns. When the markets opened at 9:30, Kingswell stock didn't just dip, it stumbled. The rumor mill went into overdrive. Why would a small, agile tech company walk away from a giant? What did they see during due diligence? The phrase toxic leadership from our termination letter had somehow, miraculously, found its way into a blog post by a prominent short seller. The stock opened at $42. By 10 o'clock, it was trading at $38. It was a wobble, not a crash, but it was enough to make the board of directors sweat. At 10:15, my office line rang. Marisol looked at me from the doorway. "It is him." I didn't have to ask who. I pressed the speaker button. "This is Addison Watson. You are a foolish little girl." Harlan Kingswell's voice filled the room. He didn't say hello. He sounded like a man who was used to scolding servants. "Good morning to you, too." "Harlan," I said, leaning back in my chair and crossing my legs. "I assume you received our termination notice. The check for the breakup fee should have cleared by now." "I don't want your $2 million, Harlan spat. "I want to know what the hell you think you are doing. Leaking slander to the press? Governance concerns? Do you have any idea who you are dealing with? I will bury you in litigation for the next decade. I will drain your company dry." "You are welcome to try," I said, "but I think you will find your legal budget is going to be somewhat constrained. How is the stock price looking this morning?" "Harlan?" "The stock is fine," he roared, though I could hear the tremor in his voice. "This is a momentary blip, and once I explain that I walked away from you because you were incompetent, the market will correct. I am going to release a statement in 1 hour. Addison, I am going to tell the world that Northglass is a fraud and that your technology is vaporware." "I wouldn't do that if I were you," I said coolly. "And why is that? Are you going to cry?" "No," I said, "because if you lie to the market to manipulate the stock price, that is securities fraud. And considering the scrutiny you are about to be under, I would advise strict adherence to the truth." "You have nothing on me," he sneered. "You are nobody. You are a guest who got drunk on champagne and forgot her place. Now, let's stop this nonsense. You want a better price? Is that it? Fine. Come to my office. We will talk like adults. I might even forgive this little tantrum if you sign the original deal by noon." He still didn't get it. He thought this was a negotiation. He thought he was holding the cards. "I am afraid I cannot come to your office, Harlan," I said. "I have a board meeting." "You are the board. It is your company." "Not that board meeting," I said, allowing myself a small smile that he couldn't see. "I have a meeting with my financial advisors to discuss asset management. Specifically, the management of a rather large block of senior debt that we acquired on Saturday." There was silence on the line, absolute, dead silence. "What did you say?" His voice was a whisper now. "I said, I bought your debt. Harlan, $150 million of it. I am not your acquisition target anymore. I am your creditor." That is impossible. Capital City held that paper. They wouldn't sell to you." "They sold to a fund," I said, "which I control, which means, Harlan, that when you violate your loan covenants, which you are dangerously close to doing with this stock drop, I am the one who gets to call the loan. I am the one who gets to audit your books, and I am the one who gets to decide if you keep your job." I could hear his breathing. It was heavy, ragged. "You are bluffing," he stammered. "Am I?" I asked. "Check the transfer records. Or better yet, call your CFO. I am sure he's trying to reach you right now." I leaned forward toward the speakerphone. "You wanted an adult conversation. Harlan, you wanted to talk about who belongs at the table? Well, pull up a chair, because I just bought the table." I didn't wait for his response. I reached out and disconnected the call. The room was silent. Gwen took off her glasses and cleaned them slowly. Derek let out a long breath he seemed to have been holding for 10 minutes. "He is going to come for us with everything he has," Gwen said quietly. "I know," I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. "He is going to try to kill the company. He is going to try to ruin my reputation. He is going to fight dirty." I looked at the whiteboard, at the red circle around the Kentucky substation. "But he is fighting a war over territory," I said. "He doesn't realize we are fighting for survival, and he has never had to survive a day in his life." I turned to my team. Get the war room ready for phase 2, I said. The adults are here. The conference room at North Glass Systems had transformed. It was no longer a place where we discussed server maintenance or client acquisition. It had become a bunker. We called it the war room, and for the last 48 hours, the air inside had been recycled so many times it tasted like ozone and dry erase markers. My team was assembled like a tribunal. To my left sat Gwen Holloway, my general counsel, a woman who read contracts the way other people read love letters, searching for the hidden meaning between the lines. To my right was Derek Sloan, my CFO, who was currently fueled by his 5th espresso and the sheer thrill of hunting a whale. And standing by the door, guarding our privacy like a Cerberus in a pencil skirt, was Marisol Trent. We had the debt. We had the leverage. Now we needed the kill switch. Okay, I said, pacing the length of the room. The floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, but I wasn't looking at the view. I was looking at the whiteboard where we had dissected the anatomy of Kingswell infrastructure. We own the paper, $150 million of senior secured notes, but simply owning the debt isn't enough to fire a CEO. Harlan will argue that the company is still solvent. He will make his payments. He will smile and pretend nothing is wrong until he finds a way to refinance and push us out. I turned to Gwen. Tell me how we break him. Tell me where the bone snaps. Gwen adjusted her glasses and tapped a thick stack of documents in front of her. It is in the covenants. Addison, specifically, the non-financial covenants attached to the institutional tranche you just bought. She slid a paper across the table. It was highlighted in neon yellow. Clause 17, Section B, Gwen said, her voice crisp. The reputational solvency clause. It is a standard insertion for high-risk corporate bonds, usually ignored because nobody thinks it will ever trigger. It states that if the executive leadership engages in conduct that materially damages the public trust or brand equity of the entity, the lenders have the right to declare a default. Material damage, Derek mused, spinning a pen in his fingers. That is subjective. Harlan is an arrogance machine, but being a jerk isn't a default event. He insults people every day. The market prices it in. Exactly, I said. He called me trash in a private dining room. It was humiliating, but it wasn't a breach of contract. It was just Tuesday for Harlan Kingswell. Gwen smiled, a sharp, predatory expression. But look at the subclause. Addison. It defines material damage as any event that results in significant negative media coverage or loss of key strategic partnerships due to ethical misconduct. And here's the kicker. Upon such an event, the lenders, that is us, have the right to demand an immediate independent audit of internal governance. I stopped pacing. The pieces were clicking into place. So, I said slowly, we don't need him to go bankrupt. We just need him to look bad. Really, really bad. If he looks toxic enough, we trigger Clause 17. We demand the audit, and once we are inside the books, we find the bodies, Derek finished. We find the self-dealing. We find the safety overrides. We find the real reasons the Kentucky substation blew up. It is a domino effect, Gwen agreed. Scandal triggers the covenant. Covenant triggers the audit. Audit exposes the fraud. Fraud triggers the removal of the CEO. I looked at the whiteboard. The plan was elegant. It was a perfect trap, but it had one missing component. We need the scandal, I said. My word against his isn't enough. He will say I am a bitter ex-fiancé making things up. He will say I am hysterical. The old boys club will circle the wagons and protect him. We need something undeniable. We need proof. The room fell silent. We all knew the problem. Harlan was careful. He did his dirty work in private rooms, behind non-disclosure agreements and security details. He didn't leave a paper trail for his cruelty. My phone vibrated on the table, breaking the silence. I ignored it. Marisol, I said, start digging into the archives. Look for former employees who left on bad terms. Look for sexual harassment settlements. Look for environmental violations. Already on it, Marisol said from the door. But Addison, you might want to check your phone. I am busy. It is not a number we have on file, Marisol said, glancing at her own tablet where she monitored my communications. But the text preview says, well, you should read it. I frowned and picked up the phone. The screen was bright in the dim room. The message was from an unknown number. It was short. I think you hate me. But I think you hate my father more. I stared at the words. There was only one person who spoke with that specific blend of detachment and insight. Vivian Kingswell, Caleb's older sister, the one Harlan never talked about because she had committed the cardinal sin of being born female in a dynasty that worshipped sons. Vivian, who ran the Kingswell Charitable Foundation, a job Harlan gave her to keep her busy and out of the boardroom. I looked up at my team. Clear the room, I said. Derek looked surprised. What? I need 5 minutes. Alone. Now. They didn't argue. They knew that tone. Gwen gathered her papers. Derek grabbed his coffee, and they filed out, leaving me alone in the sudden quiet of the war room. I sat down and typed a reply. Vivian. The response came 3 seconds later, 3 bouncing dots, then a text. I am parked 2 blocks from your office. Black SUV. I am not coming up. Too many cameras. Come down. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think about security. I grabbed my coat and walked out. The street was cold, the wind whipping through the concrete canyons of the financial district. I found the black SUV parked near a fire hydrant. The window rolled down halfway. Vivian sat in the driver's seat. She looked like a sharper, harder version of Caleb. She had the same dark eyes, but where Caleb's were soft and pleading, hers were made of flint. She was smoking a slim cigarette, the smoke curling out into the gray afternoon. Get in, she said. I opened the passenger door and slid inside. The car smelled of menthol and expensive leather. Hello, Addison, she said, not looking at me. She kept her eyes on the rearview mirror. You have been busy, buying debt, threatening lawsuits. You have made quite a mess of my father's week. He made a mess of my life. Vivian, I am just returning the favor. She took a drag of the cigarette. He is terrified, you know. He won't show it. But I saw him this morning. He was shouting at the lawyers, blaming everyone but himself. That is how I know you are winning. He only shouts when he is losing. Why are you here? I asked. Did he send you? Is this the part where you offer me a settlement to go away? Vivian laughed, a low, throaty sound. She turned to look at me then. You think I work for him? Addison, you were in the family for 3 years. You saw how he treats me. I am the spare. I am the tax write-off. Caleb is the golden boy, and I am the receptionist with the last name. She reached into her purse. My muscles tensed, expecting a subpoena, a lawsuit, maybe a weapon. She pulled out a small silver USB drive. You are looking for a lever, Vivian said, rolling the drive between her fingers. You have the debt, but you need a reason to use it. You need him to break the morality clause. I looked at the drive. What is that? Thursday night, she said. The dinner. My breath caught in my throat. You recorded it? I record everything, Vivian said simply. Family dinners, board meetings, my father's rants. I started doing it years ago. I told myself it was for protection. In case the family image ever needed management, I thought if I had proof of what really happens, I could stop him from destroying us one day. She held the drive out to me. I sat 2 seats away from you. Addison, my phone was on the table, face down, recording app open. The microphone on the new iPhone is remarkably sensitive. It picked up everything, the clinking of the silverware, Caleb's silence, and the word, trash. I stared at the small silver object. It was light, insignificant, but it was a grenade. Why give it to me? I asked. This destroys the family name. This humiliates Caleb. This hurts you. The family name is already rotting, Vivian said. It is a carcass. My father is eating it from the inside out. If he stays in power, there will be nothing left for any of us in 5 years. He will gamble it all away on his ego. You are trying to kill the king. Addison, I am just opening the castle gate. She pressed the drive into my hand. Her fingers were cold. Caleb is weak, she said. He won't forgive you for this, but he won't stop you either. He is relieved, deep down. He doesn't want to be the heir. He just wants to be told what to do. And what do you want, Vivian? I want a seat, she said. When you rebuild the board, when you clear out the sycophants and the yes men, I don't want the charity foundation. I want operations. I want to work. I looked at her. I saw the hunger there, the same hunger I had, the hunger to be taken seriously. If I win, I said, closing my fingers around the drive, we will talk. Good. She unlocked the doors. Now get out, before his security team spots my car. I walked back to the office with the drive in my pocket. It felt heavy, like it carried its own gravity. Back in the war room, I plugged it into an air-gapped laptop. Gwen and Derek stood behind me. We didn't speak. I put on the headphones and pressed play. The audio was crystal clear, not a look of curiosity. It was the look a gardener gives a weed. I fast-forwarded, and then I heard it. Harlan's voice, rich, baritone, oozing with condescension. You are trash, my dear, and you do not belong at this table. Hearing it again was different than living it. When I lived it, I was in shock. Hearing it now, recorded, immutable. It sounded like a confession. It sounded like a hate crime against dignity. But then, the recording continued. And this was the part I hadn't heard. This was the part after I'd walked out. I heard the sound of the heavy door closing behind me. Then I heard Harlan's laugh. Well, Harlan's voice said on the tape, that took care of itself. Now, let's get back to business. Once we acquire her little company, we will strip the IP and shut down that ridiculous Detroit office. I am not having my technology developed in a slum. Gwen inhaled sharply. Got him. I took off the headphones. My hands were trembling, not from fear but from rage. He admitted it, Gwen said, her eyes wide. He admitted premeditated intent to strip assets and fire staff immediately after acquisition. That is bad faith negotiation. That is fraud. And the slum comment? That is the PR death knell. That is the material damage to brand equity we needed. We release it, Derek said, slamming his hand on the table. We send it to the Wall Street Journal. We send it to Twitter. We burn him down tonight. No, I said. The room stopped. No? Derek asked. Addison, this is the nuke. This ends him. If we release it now, he fights it in the court of public opinion, I said, my mind racing ahead. He spins it. He claims it was edited. He claims it was AI-generated. He drags it out for months while the company collapses. I don't want to burn the company down. I want to own it. I ejected the drive. We don't fire the gun, I said. We put it on the table. I turned to Marisol. Open my calendar, I said. Send an invitation to Harlan Kingswell. For when? Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. The original time he wanted to meet. Location? Here, I said. North Glass? Which room? Marisol asked. The executive suite? No, I said. Book the Glass House. The Glass House was our main conference room. It was a fishbowl, 4 walls of transparent, soundproof glass in the center of the open-plan office. When the sun hit it in the morning, it was blindingly bright. There were no shadows. Everyone on the floor could see inside. He won't come, Gwen said. He is too proud to come to your turf. He will come, I said, holding up the USB drive. Because I am going to send him a 10-second snippet of this audio file with the invitation, just the part where he calls me trash. No threat, no text, just the file. I looked at the team. He will come because he needs to know what else is on the tape. He will come because a bully is always a coward when they realize someone else is holding the stick. And when he gets here? Derek asked. When he gets here, I said. We don't negotiate, we dictate. I walked to the window. The sun was setting, painting the city in shades of bruised purple and red. He wanted to know who I really was. I whispered to the reflection in the glass. Tomorrow, I am going to show him. I turned back to the room. Get the paperwork ready for a restructuring, I ordered, and draft a resignation letter. Leave the name blank. I want it ready for him to sign. The game of chess was over. We had moved past pawns and knights. It was checkmate in one move, and Harlan Kingswell didn't even know he was already off the board. Harlan Kingswell arrived at North Glass Systems at 8:55 in the morning. He did not arrive like a guest. He arrived like an inspection team looking for a reason to condemn a building. I watched him from the monitors in the security office. He swept through the lobby doors, flanked by two junior associates who looked like they were carrying the nuclear codes, but were likely just holding his ego. Harlan was wearing a charcoal pinstripe suit that probably cost more than my receptionist's made in a year. He walked past the security turnstiles without stopping, expecting them to open simply because he was approaching them. They didn't. Marcus, my head of security, stepped in front of him. Marcus was 6 feet 4 inches of former linebacker who had very little patience for entitlement. I pressed the button on the intercom to listen in. Name? Marcus asked, his voice bored. I am Harlan Kingswell, Harlan barked, affronted that he had to identify himself to a human being he considered furniture. I am here to see the CEO. Open this gate immediately. Do you have an appointment, Mr. Kingswell? I have a meeting. Now move. I need to see ID, Marcus said, unmoving. I saw Harlan's face turn a shade of red that clashed with his silk tie. He wasn't used to barriers. He was used to doors being held open. He fumbled for his wallet, muttering something that the microphone picked up as incompetent little shop. Let him up. Marcus, I said into the headset, escort him to the glass house. Copy that. Boss. I watched as Harlan was led through the main floor. North Glass wasn't designed like his world. There were no corner offices with heavy oak doors. It was an open floor plan, a hive of activity where engineers, data scientists, and analysts worked at standing desks. The energy was frenetic and young. Harlan looked around with a sneer of distaste, viewing the casual dress code and the collaborative noise as signs of unprofessionalism. He didn't understand that the people in hoodies he was passing were writing algorithms that could shut down his power plants in 3 seconds. Marcus led him to the glass house. It was exactly what I had intended it to be. A conference room in the dead center of the floor, enclosed entirely in soundproof. Transparent glass. It was exposed. It was bright. The morning sun was streaming in from the skylights, illuminating every corner. There were no shadows to hide in. There was no head of the table, just a round slab of polished concrete. Harlan walked in and immediately looked for a place to sit that established dominance. He couldn't find one. He paced. He checked his watch. He glared at the engineers working outside who were glancing up at him with mild curiosity. He looked like a specimen in a jar. I waited 5 minutes. I wanted him to marinate in the visibility. I wanted him to feel the eyes of the trash on him. Then, I walked out of my office. I didn't bring my laptop. I didn't bring a notepad. I didn't bring Marisol or Gwen. I walked across the floor with my hands empty and my stride measured. I was wearing a white suit, sharp and tailored, a visual rejection of the trash label. I swiped my badge and entered the glass house. The door sealed shut behind me with a heavy, magnetic thud, cutting off the hum of the office outside. The silence in the room was sudden and absolute. Harlan turned around. He looked me up and down, his expression shifting from irritation to a sort of amused pity. Addison, he said, his voice dripping with false patience. I see you are playing tour guide today. Where is he? I stopped. Where is who? Harlan? The CEO, he said, gesturing vaguely at the empty chairs. I don't have time for games. I am here to fix this mess you made with that ridiculous email. Go get your boss. I want to talk to the person who actually signs the checks. He genuinely didn't know. It was a staggering realization. Even after everything, after the proposal, after the business meetings, after the dinner, he had never actually internalized that I ran this company. In his mind, I was just the face. I was Caleb's fiancé who had been given a title to make me feel important. He assumed there was a man behind the curtain. He assumed there had to be. I didn't say a word. I walked to the chair closest to the door, the one that faced the entire office floor, and I sat down. I leaned back, crossed my legs, and rested my hands on the table. "You are looking at her." "Harlan," I said. He blinked. "Excuse me?" "I am the CEO," I said, my voice calm, leveled. "I am the founder, I am the majority shareholder, and I am the person who just bought $150 million of your debt. So, if you want to talk to the person who signs the checks, you might want to sit down. You are looking a little pale." Harlan stared at me. The smile froze on his face, then slowly cracked and fell away like cheap plaster. He looked at the empty chair opposite me, then back at me. For the first time, he saw the predator, not the prey. He sat down, slowly. "You followed me here," he muttered, trying to regain his footing. "You are bluffing. You don't have that kind of capital. Caleb told me your revenue numbers. You are a small fish." "Addison, we are a lean fish. Harlan, there is a difference." I reached into the inside pocket of my blazer. I pulled out a single, folded document. It wasn't a thick contract. It was a summary sheet from the clearinghouse, stamped with the seal of the transaction. I slid it across the concrete table. It stopped exactly in front of his hands. "Read it," I said. Harlan picked up the paper. His hands were shaking. Just a tremor, barely visible, but I saw it. He scanned the lines. He saw the numbers. He saw the QSIP codes of the bonds. He saw the transfer confirmation to the entity controlled by Northglass. "Capital City," he whispered. "They sold." "They dumped," I corrected. "They were terrified of you. Harlan, they were terrified of your leadership. They were terrified of the Kentucky incident coming to light, so I took the risk off their hands." He looked up, his eyes wild. You can't do this. This is a conflict of interest. You were negotiating a partnership." "I was negotiating a partnership," I said. "Then you called me trash. Then you told me I didn't belong at your table. So I decided to withdraw from the partnership and buy the table instead." Harlan let out a breathy, nervous laugh. He tossed the paper back. "This is about dinner? Seriously? Addison, grow up. I was drunk. It was a stressful week. The bondholders were breathing down my neck. I took it out on you. It was a mistake. A family squabble." He leaned forward, putting on his best grandfatherly face. It was a mask I had seen him wear 100 times to charm investors. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "I apologize. There, I said it. I shouldn't have used that word. But we are family. Caleb loves you. I respect you. Don't let a bad evening ruin a billion-dollar merger. Let's put this behind us. Tear up this debt nonsense. Sign the original deal. And I will even add a seat for you on the board. A non-voting seat, but a seat nonetheless." He thought he was being generous. He thought he was throwing a bone to a dog. I looked at him, feeling a profound sense of detachment. "You call that family," I said softly. "I call it culture." "What?" "That dinner wasn't a mistake. Harlan, it was a diagnostic test. It showed me exactly how you operate. You bully, you demean, you strip value from people you think are beneath you. That isn't a bad evening. That is your corporate strategy. That is how you run Kingswell infrastructure. You treat your safety protocols the same way you treat your future daughter-in-law, as obstacles to be pushed aside." "I run a Fortune 500 company," he snapped, the mask slipping. "I employ 20,000 people, and you are endangering every single one of them." I said. I leaned forward. "Here is the reality. Harlan, the partnership is dead. I am not selling Northglass to you. Not today, not ever. I am here to collect. You are in breach of 3 separate financial covenants on these notes. Your liquidity ratio has dropped below the threshold. Your stock price has triggered a margin call warning." I tapped the table with my index finger. "I am accelerating the debt," I said. I want full repayment of the $150 million within 48 hours, or I force an involuntary restructuring of the board. Harlan turned white. I don't have the cash. You know I don't have the cash liquid. It is tied up in the expansion projects. Then you have a problem, I said. You will bankrupt us, he hissed. You will destroy the company just to spite me? That is petty, Addison. That is emotional. No, I said. Destroying the company would be emotional. I am not going to destroy it. I am going to save it. From you. Save it? He scoffed. You are a coder. You know nothing about infrastructure. I know that you have been falsifying safety reports, I said. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a lung. Harlan froze. His eyes locked onto mine. The arrogance evaporated instantly, replaced by pure, unadulterated fear. I know about Kentucky, I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. I know about the overrides. I know you ordered the team to bypass the thermal regulators to hit your output targets. I have the emails. Harlan, I have the logs. That is privileged information, he stammered. You signed an NDA. I signed an NDA regarding the technical fix, I said. I did not sign an NDA to cover up criminal negligence, and even if I did, owning this debt gives me the right to audit your internal controls if I suspect mismanagement. And Harlan? I suspect a lot of mismanagement. He slumped back in his chair. He looked old. Suddenly, the charcoal suit looked too big for him. He looked at the glass walls surrounding us, at the young engineers working outside, at the bright, merciless sunlight. He realized he was in a cage. He tried one last desperate pivot. He went for the emotional jugular. Think about Caleb, he pleaded, his voice cracking. If you do this, if you push me out, you kill his inheritance. You kill his future. He is innocent in this. Addison, he loves you. Are you really going to burn down his legacy because his father was rude to you? I felt a flash of anger, but I tamped it down. Caleb is 35 years old. Harlan, I said, he isn't a child, and this isn't his legacy. It is his cage. He will hate you, Harlan said venomously. He will never forgive you. He might, I admitted, but at least he will be free. I am not destroying his future. Harlan, I am saving him from a sinking ship. I am saving him from having to explain to the SEC why his father cooked the books. I am doing the one thing you never did for him. I am protecting him. Harlan opened his mouth to scream, to curse, to throw something. But at that exact moment, my phone rang. It was placed face up on the table between us. The caller ID displayed a name that Harlan recognized immediately. Sterling Capital Partners. It was one of the largest private equity funds in New York. The fund that Harlan had been trying to court for 2 years to refinance his debt, and who had consistently refused his calls. I let it ring twice. Then I pressed the speaker button. Addison Watson speaking. Addison? The voice on the other end was deep and clear. It is Sterling. We have reviewed the due diligence package you sent over last night, the analysis of the Kingswell debt structure, and your plan for the operational turnaround. Harlan stopped breathing. He stared at the phone. And? I asked. We are in, Sterling said. The investment committee just voted. We are ready to back your position. We will provide the bridge financing for the full acquisition of Kingswell infrastructure. Contingent on the removal of current executive management, we have $400 million ready to deploy as soon as you give the word. I looked at Harlan. He looked like he had been shot. Thank you, Sterling, I said, holding Harlan's gaze. I am currently in a meeting with the legacy management. I believe we will have a resolution very shortly. Excellent. Call me when the papers are signed. I hung up. The silence in the glass house was deafening. $400 million, Harlan whispered. They gave you $400 million. They bet on the jockey, not the horse, I said. They know the horse is sick, but they think I can ride it. I stood up. I walked around the table until I was standing right next to him. I didn't loom over him. I didn't need to. He was already small. You have two choices. Harlan, I said. Option A. I declare default on the debt today. We go to court. I release the safety reports. The stock goes to zero. You get investigated by the DOJ. You leave in handcuffs, and your family name becomes a synonym for fraud. I paused. Option B. You resign today, citing health reasons. You sign over your voting rights to the creditor committee. We restructure the debt. We keep the company alive. You keep your pension. You keep your house in Florida. And you walk away with a shred of dignity, but you never set foot in this building or any Kingswell building again. Harlan looked up at me. His eyes were wet. He looked at the woman he had called trash, the woman he had dismissed as a servant. Who are you? He asked, his voice shaking. Really? I looked down at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to justify myself. I am the person who belongs at the head of the table, I said. Now, get out of my chair. The 48 hours following the meeting in the glass house were not quiet. I had expected Harlan Kingswell to surrender. I had underestimated the ferocity of a narcissist backed into a corner. He did not step down. He did not sign the resignation letter. Instead, he declared war. By Wednesday morning, the narrative in the business press had shifted. Harlan had called in every favor he was owed, from 30 years of country club dinners and political donations. The headlines didn't talk about Kingswell Infrastructure's liquidity crisis or the debt I had acquired. They talked about me, the Black Widow of Wall Street. Read one tabloid. Tech CEO uses fiancé to launch hostile takeover. Read a respectable financial blog that should have known better. Harlan was leaking stories. He was digging into my past, finding the poverty I had fought so hard to escape and spinning it into a weapon. He painted a picture of a scrappy, desperate girl from Detroit who had seduced his son solely to get close to the family empire. He claimed North Glass Systems was a shell company with unproven technology, and that my move to buy the debt was a frantic attempt to cover up my own insolvency. It was a classic smear campaign. If you cannot attack the math, attack the woman doing the counting. I stood in my office, watching a cable news segment where a pundit was questioning my emotional stability. He is trying to make you radioactive, Gwen Holloway said, not looking up from her tablet. She was sitting on my sofa, surrounded by legal briefs. He wants the other creditors to get nervous and back out. He wants Sterling Capital to think you are a liability. Is it working? I asked, turning away from the screen. Sterling is holding firm, Gwen said. But Harlan has filed a temporary restraining order to block you from exercising your voting rights on the debt. He is suing for tortious interference and market manipulation. He claims you obtained confidential information during your engagement to Caleb and used it to trade against the company. I used public filings and common sense, I said. Truth is a defense in court. Addison. But it takes time. Harlan doesn't need to win the lawsuit. He just needs to tie us up in discovery for 6 months until he can find a white knight investor to bail him out. I walked to my desk. He won't find a white knight. The books are too dirty. He might, Gwen countered, if he hides the dirt well enough. And right now, he is blocking us from the audit. The judge set a hearing for Friday. That gives Harlan 2 days to shred documents. The intercom buzzed. It was Derek Sloan. Addison, you need to come to the server room, now. I am busy with legal. Derek. Bring legal, Derek said. You are going to want a witness for this. I looked at Gwen. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. We walked down the hall to the secure server room where Derek and his team of forensic accountants had been set up since Monday. The room was dark, lit only by the blue glow of monitors. Derek was standing in front of a large screen, pointing at a complex web of transaction lines. We have been scraping the public ledgers, Derek said, his voice vibrating with caffeine and excitement. Cross-referencing Kingswell's declared vendors with state incorporation records. We were looking for leaks. We found a fire hose. Show me, I said. Okay, look at this entity here. Derek pointed to a box labeled Apex Logistics Solutions. Kingswell Infrastructure paid them $40 million last year for consulting and supply chain management. Standard stuff, right? Except Apex doesn't have a website. They don't have a LinkedIn page. Their registered address is a P.O. box in Delaware. A shell company? Gwen asked. It gets better, Derek said. I traced the ownership of Apex. It is owned by a holding company in the Caymans. And do you know who sits on the board of that holding company? He hit a key. A name appeared on the screen. Jericho Vance. Who is Jericho Vance? I asked. He is Harlan's personal estate attorney, Gwen said, her eyes narrowing. He handles the family trust. Exactly, Derek said. Harlan is paying $40 million of company money to a shell company controlled by his personal lawyer, and then, 3 days after the payment clears, Apex loans $35 million back to a different Kingswell subsidiary to cover a shortfall in operating cash flow. I stared at the screen. The pattern was clear. Round tripping, I whispered. He is taking money out of the left pocket, running it through a laundry cycle, and putting it back in the right pocket as revenue to boost the quarterly numbers. It is self-dealing, Gwen said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. It is fraud. It is textbook securities fraud. He is artificially inflating the stock price to trigger his performance bonuses. This isn't just a covenant breach, I said, feeling the weight of the discovery. This is prison time. If we hand this to the SEC, Harlan doesn't just lose his job, he goes to federal prison for 20 years. And the stock goes to zero, Derek added. If this comes out, Kingswell Infrastructure is insolvent overnight. The assets will be seized. The employees will lose their pensions. It will be a crater. I looked at the data. This was the nuclear option I had been looking for. It was the weapon that could end the war in 5 minutes. But the blast radius would kill everyone, not just Harlan. It would kill the 20,000 workers I had told Harlan I wanted to protect. It would kill Caleb's inheritance completely. I needed precision, not a bomb. Do not release this, I ordered. Not yet. Addison, Derek argued. This is the kill shot. It is a suicide vest, I corrected. If we blow him up now, we destroy the asset we are trying to save. We need leverage to force him out, not a bomb that collapses the building. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A secure message notification. I pulled it out. It was Vivian. Check your personal email. The encrypted one. Subject line, Kentucky. I turned to Derek. Pull up my secure mail on the main screen. He typed in the command. The inbox appeared. I opened the email from Vivian. It contained a single attachment, a scanned PDF of a handwritten memo. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Harlan's. The jagged, aggressive scrawl of a man who wrote like he was carving stone. The memo was dated 8 months ago. It was addressed to the Chief Operating Officer. Regarding the Kentucky grid upgrade, stop delaying. The timeline is unacceptable. Bypass the stress test protocols if you have to. I don't care about the safety margins. I care about the completion date. If we miss the quarterly target, the stock drops. Get it done. If the regulators ask, blame the weather. There it was, the smoking gun. The financial fraud was complex. It required explanation. But this was visceral. This was a direct order to ignore safety that resulted in a blackout. This was negligence that endangered lives. He wrote it down, Gwen said, stunned. He actually wrote it down. He is arrogant, I said. He thought nobody would ever see it. He thought he owned the people he sent it to. I looked at the 2 screens. On the left, the financial fraud that proved he was a thief. On the right, the memo that proved he was a danger to the public. I had everything. I could destroy him utterly. I could send him to jail and leave him penniless. After the way he treated me, after the trash comment, after the smear campaign of the last 2 days, a part of me wanted to do exactly that. I wanted to burn him to the ground and salt the earth. But then I thought about the cleaning lady, Elena, who asked me about her kids. I thought about the thousands of engineers who just wanted to build a better grid. We are not going to the SEC, I said. And we are not going to the press. Then what are we doing? Gwen asked. We are going to make him a trade, I said. His silence for his freedom. He won't take it, Derek said. He thinks he can win. He thinks he is fighting a business battle, I said. He doesn't know I have the criminal files. Print them out, all of them. Put them in a binder. I turned to walk out of the room, but Marisol appeared in the doorway. She looked pale. Addison, she said, you have a visitor. I told you, no press. It isn't the press, she said. It is Caleb. I froze. He is in the lobby, Marisol continued. Security tried to turn him away, but he refused to leave. He says he has something for you. He says it is the only thing he has left. I looked at the binder Derek was assembling. Then I looked at Marisol. Send him up, I said. But not to the conference room, to my office. 10 minutes later, the door to my office opened. Caleb looked like a ghost of the man I had known. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. His shirt was wrinkled, the top button undone, his tie missing. He looked exhausted, carrying the weight of a conflict he was never built to sustain. He walked in and stood by the door. He didn't try to hug me. He didn't try to smile. You look tired. Caleb, I said, standing behind my desk. I kept the distance between us. It was a barrier I needed. I haven't slept, he said. His voice was hoarse. It has been a nightmare at the house. He is screaming at everyone. He fired the housekeeper yesterday because she brought him the wrong coffee. He is unraveling. He is losing control, I said. That is what men like him do when the world stops obeying them. Caleb walked forward slowly. He reached into his pocket. My heart did a traitorous little stutter, but his hand came out holding a small velvet box. He placed it on the edge of my desk. He didn't slide it. He just set it down. I came to give you this, he said. It was the engagement ring, a 3-carat diamond that Harlan had picked out. Not Caleb. I had always hated it. It was too big, too cold. You could have kept it, I said, or sold it. It isn't mine, Caleb said. Nothing is mine. I realized that yesterday. He looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed. I read the termination letter. Addison, the one you sent to the board. Toxic leadership, governance concerns. You were right, about all of it. I know I was right. I should have stood up, he said, his voice cracking. At the dinner, I should have flipped the table. I should have punched him. I played it over in my head 1,000 times, but I didn't. I sat there. Why did you sit there, Caleb? I asked. I needed to hear him say it. Because I was afraid, he whispered. Not of him hitting me. I was afraid of being cut off. I have never earned $1 in my life that he didn't sign for. I don't know who I am without his name. You are a man who could have been decent, I said. If you had chosen to be. There is something else, Caleb said. He looked down at his shoes. Something you need to know before you take over. What is it? My shares, he said. The 15% of the company that was supposed to be in my trust. The shares that made me a valuable husband. What about them? They are gone, Caleb said. I frowned. What do you mean, gone? He pledged them, Caleb said, looking up, and I saw the betrayal burning in his eyes. Harlan, he used my trust fund as collateral for a high-risk loan 3 years ago to cover losses in the Asian market. He forged my signature on the authorization documents. I found out yesterday when I tried to access the account to hire a lawyer. I stared at him. He stole your inheritance? His own son? He didn't see it as stealing, Caleb said bitterly. He said it was family capital. He said he was protecting the empire, but the loan is underwater. If the stock price drops below $30, the bank seizes everything. My trust, my future, everything. I am worth 0. Addison, less than 0. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Harlan hadn't just insulted me, he had cannibalized his own child to feed his ego. He had called me trash while he was robbing his son blind. He threatened me, Caleb continued. When I confronted him, he said if I told you, he would ruin me. But I figured, you are already ruining him, so it doesn't matter. He looked at the ring on the desk. You win. Addison, you bought the debt. You have the power. Burn it down. He deserves it. I deserve it. I looked at the ring, then at the binder on my desk. The binder that contained the proof of fraud and the safety memos. If I released the information in that binder, the stock would crash. It would go to zero. And Caleb's shares, the collateral, would be seized. He would be left with nothing. Harlan would drag him down into the abyss with him. I walked around the desk. I stood in front of Caleb. He flinched slightly, as if expecting me to strike him. You think I am doing this for revenge? I asked quietly. Aren't you? He asked. He called you trash. You are destroying his company to prove him wrong. I am not destroying his company. Caleb, I am saving it. I picked up the binder. And I am not doing this to punish you, I said. I am doing this because you are incapable of saving yourself. I held the binder tight against my chest. If I bankrupt the company, you lose everything. Your shares, your trust, your name, you become a casualty. I am already a casualty, he said. No, I said. You are a hostage, and I am the negotiation team. I walked to the door and opened it. Go home, Caleb. Pack a bag. Get out of that house. Go to a hotel. Do not tell your father you were here. Why? He asked, confused. What are you going to do? I looked him in the eye. I am going to pay a visit to your father, I said, and I am going to buy your freedom. Addison, he started, tears welling up again. Why? After what I did? I looked at the man I had almost married. I didn't love him anymore. That part of me had died at the dinner table. But I didn't hate him either. I pitied him, and I refused to let Harlan Kingswell claim another victim. I didn't buy his company to get revenge on you. Caleb, I said, my voice steady and final. I bought it so you wouldn't have to live in his shadow anymore. Now go. Caleb stood there for a moment, then nodded. He walked out the door, leaving the ring on the desk. I watched him leave. Then I turned to Marisol. Call the car, I said, and tell Gwen to meet me downstairs. We are going to Kingswell headquarters. Do we have an appointment? Marisol asked. I touched the cover of the binder containing the evidence of Harlan's crimes. We don't need an appointment, I said. We have a warrant, or the corporate equivalent of one. I grabbed my coat. The time for remote warfare was over. I was going to look Harlan in the eye and make him sign his own political death warrant, and I was going to do it before the market closed. The market opened on Thursday with the nervous energy of a bomb disposal unit. The stock ticker for Kingswell Infrastructure was flashing red. Hovering at $31 a share, it had lost nearly 20% of its value in 3 days. The sharks were circling, but they didn't know I was already in the water, and I had brought a harpoon. While Harlan was busy screaming at cable news producers and threatening lawsuits, I was fighting a different war. I was fighting the ground war. My team at Northglass was not sleeping. We had turned the conference room into a command center that rivaled a political campaign headquarters. Derek Sloan was coordinating a team of proxy solicitors, the mercenaries of the corporate world, whose job was to call shareholders and convince them to lend us their voting rights. We weren't targeting the big institutional funds yet. They were too cautious, waiting to see which way the wind blew. We were targeting the small fish, the retired teachers in Ohio, the dentists in Florida, the day traders who were watching their portfolios bleed out because of Harlan's ego. They were angry, they were frightened, and they were desperate for a change in leadership. We just crossed 5% in proxy commitments, Derek announced, slamming a phone down. That is another 2 million votes. They are terrified. Addison, they think the company is going under. They are signing over their voting rights just to stop the bleeding. Keep going, I said, staring at the monitors. I need 8% by noon. I need enough weight to force a quorum issue if Harlan tries to block the meeting. Gwen Holloway was sitting at the main table, her laptop surrounded by a fortress of legal filings. She was drafting the Schedule 13D amendment, the mandatory disclosure form that would tell the Securities and Exchange Commission and the world exactly what we were doing. It has to be boring, Gwen, I reminded her. I want this filing to read like a stereo instruction manual. No adjectives, no accusations, just the math. It is cleaner than a hospital operating room, Gwen assured me, typing rapidly. We are disclosing the debt position, the proxy agreements, and the intent to engage in constructive dialogue regarding governance. If Harlan's lawyers try to claim we are manipulating the market, they will slide right off this document. There is no emotion here, just dry, hard facts. That was the strategy. Harlan was fire and noise. I was ice and silence. He was making it personal. I was making it inevitable. At 10 o'clock, the alert flashed on our screens. Harlan had made his move. He is trying to swallow the poison pill, Derek said, his voice tight. The board just filed a notice of intent to adopt a shareholder rights plan. If any single entity acquires more than 15% of the stock, they will flood the market with cheap shares to dilute the position. It was a classic defense mechanism. It was designed to make a hostile takeover mathematically impossible. Harlan was trying to drown me in paper. He thinks I am buying equity, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. He is fighting the war from 10 years ago. How do we stop it? Derek asked. If he dilutes the stock, our leverage on the debt means less. He cannot issue new equity, I said. Gwen, pull up the debt covenants on the notes we bought from Capital City. Gwen didn't need to look. She knew the contract by heart. Clause 9. The borrower shall not materially alter the capital structure of the entity while under a liquidity review or notice of potential default. Exactly, I said. We already notified him of the breach regarding the safety reports and the self-dealing. He is technically in a default investigation period. If he issues a single new share of stock, he triggers an immediate acceleration of the entire bond principal. He would have to pay back all $1 billion of company debt instantly. He would be insolvent in 10 seconds, Derek said, understanding dawning on his face. Draft the letter. Gwen, I ordered. Inform the board of directors that adopting a poison pill defense constitutes a willful act of bankruptcy under the terms of our loan. Tell them that if they vote for it, I will foreclose on the company's assets before their lunch break is over. We sent the letter at 10:15. At 10:30, the poison pill filing was quietly withdrawn. Harlan had tried to pull the trigger, and I had jammed the gun, but I knew I couldn't win this with just threats. I needed a man on the inside. I needed someone who was in the room with Harlan, someone who saw the madness up close and was looking for the exit. I had identified him 2 days ago. Arthur Penhaligon. He was 70 years old, a member of the Kingswell board for 2 decades. He was old money, risk-averse, and most importantly, he had a reputation for being the conscience of the board, which usually meant he was the one who smoothed things over. But looking at his voting record, I saw he had abstained from the last 3 major capital expenditure votes. He was doubting Harlan. I had sent a message through a mutual contact, not an email, a handwritten note. I offer a lifeboat, not a torpedo, at 11 o'clock. My phone rang. It was a blocked number. Ms. Watson, a cultured, weary voice said. I have a 15-minute window. I am at the coffee shop on the corner of 3rd and Grand. I am wearing a beige raincoat. I am on my way, I said. I left the building through the service exit to avoid the reporters camping in the lobby. I walked the 2 blocks in the biting wind, my mind sharpening. This was the pivot point. Arthur Penhaligon was sitting in a back booth, nursing a black coffee. He looked like a man who hadn't slept well in a month. He watched me approach with wary eyes. You have caused quite a stir, Ms. Watson, he said as I sat down. Harlan is currently throwing a vase against the wall of his office. I imagine he is, I said. I am sorry about the vase. I am sure it was an antique. It was, Arthur said. Like everything else in that building, including us. He looked at me. Why am I here? If you are going to threaten me with lawsuits, you can do it through my lawyers. I am not here to threaten you, Arthur, I said. I am here to offer you a way out. I know you saw the memo regarding the Kentucky substation. I know Harlan forced the board to sign off on the weather event explanation. Arthur flinched. I didn't know the extent of the negligence. He told us it was a minor protocol deviation. It wasn't minor, I said. And when the Department of Justice investigates, I didn't know, will not keep you out of federal court. Harlan is going to drag you all down with him. He will claim the board authorized everything. He will use you as a human shield. Arthur stared into his coffee. He knew I was right. What do you want? He asked quietly. I want a vote, I said. I am going to force an emergency board meeting. I need a majority vote to remove Harlan Kingswell as CEO for cause. I need you to lead that vote. He will destroy me, Arthur said. He has files on everyone. He plays dirty. He is already destroyed, I said. He just hasn't hit the ground yet. I am offering you the chance to be the man who saved the company, not the man who buried it. I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. This is my term sheet, I said. If the board removes Harlan and appoints me as interim CEO to lead the restructuring, I pledge the following. No liquidation of assets, the pension fund stays fully funded, and a 12-month moratorium on layoffs for all operational staff, the engineers, the linemen, the support crew, they stay. Arthur looked up, surprised. You aren't going to strip it? The analysts said you would break it up and sell it for parts. The analysts are idiots, I said. Kingswell has good bones. It has a bad brain. I am not here to kill the patient. I am here to perform a lobotomy. I want to save the jobs. Arthur, I want to build a grid that works. Harlan treats those people like numbers. I know their names. Arthur read the paper. He saw the guarantee regarding the pensions. That was his legacy. If the pensions vanished, he would be a pariah in his own social circle. 12 months? He asked. 12 months guaranteed employment for the rank and file, I said. Harlan goes, the cronies go, but the workers stay. That is the deal. Take it or leave it. Arthur looked at me for a long moment. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He realized that the woman Harlan had called trash was the only person acting with honor. He called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning, Arthur said, his voice low. He plans to fire the CFO and blame the accounting irregularities on him. He is looking for a scapegoat. Don't let him, I said. Hijack the meeting. Arthur, call for a vote of no confidence. Arthur took a deep breath. He folded the paper and put it in his pocket. If I do this, he said, you have to promise me one thing. You handle Harlan. You look him in the eye when it happens. I don't have the stomach for it. I intend to, I said. Arthur nodded, stood up, and walked out into the cold wind. I had my majority. By 2:00, the news broke, but it wasn't the news Harlan wanted. I had Gwen file the disclosure forms. The headline hit the Bloomberg terminals like a thunderclap. North Glass Systems CEO Addison Watson revealed as major holder of Kingswell debt. The market reacted instantly. The mystery was over. It wasn't a faceless hedge fund dismantling Kingswell. It was me. The narrative shifted from financial collapse to Battle of the Titans. The stock stopped plummeting and started to vibrate, bouncing wildly as traders tried to figure out if this was a murder or a merger. My phone rang. It was Harlan. I let it ring 3 times. I wanted him to sweat. Addison. His voice was a low growl. He sounded like an animal caught in a trap, exhausted and dangerous. You think you are clever? Buying off my board members? I saw Penhaligon leaving that coffee shop. I have eyes everywhere. Then you should use them to read the writing on the wall. Harlan, I said, leaning back in my chair. You are playing with lives, he shouted. Losing control. There are thousands of families depending on this company. You are treating this like a game because your feelings got hurt. You are going to crash the economy of the entire Southeast just to prove a point. I am not playing with lives, Harlan, I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria. I am protecting them. I am the one who just guaranteed the pension fund. I am the one who promised no layoffs. What have you done? You looted your son's trust fund. You endangered the grid in Kentucky. You are the liability. I built this, he screamed. It is mine. It was yours, I corrected. Now it is just a crime scene waiting for the tape. I am ending your joke. Harlan, it isn't funny anymore. I hung up. 10 minutes later, Vivian played her card. It wasn't the recording, not yet. That was the final nail. This was just the hammer. A story appeared on a prominent industry news site. Kingswell Insiders. Allege culture of fear and safety violations. The article didn't name Harlan directly, but it quoted senior sources describing a CEO who overrode engineers, threatened staff, and prioritized stock price over public safety. It mentioned the Kentucky incident. It mentioned the phrase, toxic leadership. It was the spark. The public didn't understand debt covenants, but they understood a bad boss. They understood safety risks. The public sentiment turned against Kingswell instantly. Twitter lit up. The hashtag Kingswell collapse started trending. At 4:15, just before the market closed, the email arrived. It wasn't from Harlan. It was from the corporate secretary of the board of directors. To Ms. Addison Watson, CEO, Northglass Systems. Subject, Invitation to Extraordinary General Meeting. The Board of Directors of Kingswell Infrastructure requests your attendance at an emergency session to be held tomorrow at 7 o'clock in the morning. The board intends to discuss the restructuring of executive leadership and the strategic proposal submitted by Northglass Systems. I stared at the screen. It wasn't a request for a negotiation. It was a summons to a coronation, or an execution, depending on who was holding the axe. We got it, Gwen said, reading over my shoulder. They are inviting you in. They have bypassed Harlan. He didn't authorize this. No, I said. Arthur did. I looked around the war room. The coffee cups were piled high. The whiteboard was a mess of arrows and numbers. My team looked exhausted but electric. We had done the impossible. We had breached the castle walls without firing a single shot that couldn't be justified in a court of law. Get some sleep, I told them. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. What about you? Derek asked. I walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Harlan Kingswell was sitting in his office, watching his empire dissolve. He was probably drinking scotch. He was probably blaming me, blaming Caleb, blaming the weather. He would never blame himself. I have one more thing to prepare, I said. I wasn't just bringing the debt covenants to that meeting. I was bringing the recording. I was bringing the evidence of the shell companies. And I was bringing the ghost of the girl he called trash. Tomorrow, I wouldn't just be entering a boardroom. I would be entering the inner sanctum of the old money world. And I wasn't going to knock. I was going to kick the door down. Reply to the email. Gwen, I said, turning back to the room. What should I say? Tell them Ms. Watson accepts the invitation, I said, and tell them to make sure there is an extra chair. I am bringing my own. The headquarters of Kingswell Infrastructure in Savannah, Georgia, was a monument to a time when power was measured in masonry and mahogany. It was a stark contrast to the glass and steel of my office in the city. Here, the air was thick with the scent of old paper and lemon polish. The boardroom was on the top floor, a cavernous space lined with oil portraits of dead Kingswell men who looked down on the proceedings with stern, judgmental eyes. It was 7 o'clock in the morning. The humidity outside was already rising, clinging to the Spanish moss on the oaks lining the driveway. But inside, the air conditioning was set to a glacial chill. I stood outside the double oak doors. Gwen Holloway stood beside me, clutching the black binder that contained the autopsy of Harlan Kingswell's career. Are you ready? Gwen asked quietly. I have been ready since Tuesday, I said. I didn't wait for the doors to be opened for me. I pushed them open myself. The conversation inside the room died instantly. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. The table was vast, a single slab of walnut that could seat 30 people. Sitting at the head, under the largest portrait, was Harlan. He looked different than he had at the dinner party. The tan was still there, but it looked sallow under the fluorescent lights. His eyes were rimmed with red, and his suit, usually impeccable, looked like he had slept in it, but his posture was rigid. He was holding onto the armrests of his chair as if he were strapped into an electric chair. Around the table sat the board of directors, 12 men and women who represented the old guard of Southern industry. They were people who played golf together, who vacationed in the same enclaves, who protected each other's secrets. But today, they would not meet Harlan's eyes. They studied their coffee cups. They adjusted their cufflinks. They looked anywhere but at the man they had followed blindly for 20 years. And there, sitting to Harlan's right, was Caleb. He looked up when I entered. He was shaved, dressed in a suit that looked slightly too large for him now, as if he had shrunk in the wash. Harlan must have dragged him here, a prop to remind the board of the lineage, a living symbol of the dynasty. Caleb's eyes met mine, and for a fleeting second, I saw a flash of fear, not for himself, but for what was about to happen. I walked to the foot of the table. Directly opposite Harlan, I placed the binder on the wood. The sound echoed in the silent room. "Good morning, gentlemen, ladies," I said. My voice was calm, carrying to the corners of the room without effort. Harlan let out a short, derisive snort. He leaned back, crossing his arms. "Well," he said, his voice scratching against the silence. "The guest of honor has arrived. I suppose we should be grateful she could find time between destroying reputations to join us." He looked around the table, seeking allies. "I must apologize to the board," Harlan continued, smiling a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I know this is highly irregular, bringing an outsider into a closed session, especially one who, how shall I phrase this, lacks the pedigree to understand the complexities of what we do here." He turned his gaze on me, cold and venomous. "This is a boardroom, Addison, not a cafeteria. We discuss billion-dollar infrastructure here. We don't discuss the emotional outbursts of a social accident who got lucky with a tech startup." Social accident. It was a new insult, sharper than trash, because it implied I was a mistake that needed to be corrected. He waited for the chuckle. He waited for the sycophantic laughter that had followed his jokes for decades. He waited for the room to validate his superiority. Silence. Not a single person laughed. Not a single person smiled. Arthur Penhaligon, sitting halfway down the table, took a slow sip of his water and stared straight ahead. Harlan's smile faltered. He looked around the table, confused, then angry. The realization hit him slowly. The audience had left the theater. "You seem to be under a misapprehension." "Harlan," I said, remaining standing. "I am not here as a guest, and I'm certainly not here as an outsider." I signaled to Gwen. She distributed a packet of documents to every member of the board. "I am here as the holder of $150 million of your senior secured debt," I announced. "I am here as the controller of 8% of your voting stock via proxy, and I am here as the entity that is currently keeping this company from filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection before lunch." One of the directors, a woman named Beverly who ran a logistics empire, picked up the document. She scanned the summary page. Her eyes widened. "She owns the Capital City tranche," Beverly whispered to the man next to her. "She bought the whole thing." "That is impossible," Harlan snapped. "That is a lie. She is bluffing." "The transfer codes are on page 3. "Harlan," I said, "along with the notification of default I filed with your legal department yesterday, you are in breach of 3 financial covenants and 2 non-financial covenants. I have the legal right to call the loan immediately." I paused, letting the weight of the number sink in. $150 million, I repeated. "Payable today, unless we come to an agreement." Harlan stood up. "You are blackmailing us. This is extortion." "This is capitalism." "Harlan," I said, You should recognize it. You used it to crush your competitors for 40 years. Now it is just your turn to be on the receiving end. I turned my attention to the board, ignoring Harlan completely. The company is bleeding, I said, shifting into the presentation mode I used for investors. The stock is down 20%. The credit rating is about to be downgraded to junk. The public trust is eroded. Harlan's leadership has become a liability that you can no longer afford to carry on your balance sheet. I gestured to the screen at the end of the room. Where Gwen had connected her tablet, a slide appeared. It was simple, clean, the Northglass proposal. I am proposing a restructuring, I said. Effective immediately, we inject $400 million of liquidity provided by my partners at Sterling Capital. We refinance the debt at a sustainable rate. We modernize the grid using Northglass analytics to prevent future failures. I looked at Arthur Penhaligon. And, I added, we commit to a 12-month freeze on all operational layoffs. The pension fund will be secured and ring-fenced from the restructuring costs. We save the company. We save the jobs. We save the dividends. The board members exchanged glances. I saw the relief washing over them. I was offering them a lifeboat when they thought they were drowning. And what is the price? Beverly asked, looking at me with new respect. The price is the leadership, I said. Harlan Kingswell resigns as CEO and chairman of the board, effective immediately. Over my dead body, Harlan roared. He slammed his fist onto the table, making the water glasses jump. I built this company from a regional utility into a global powerhouse. I am Kingswell Infrastructure. You think you can walk in here with your little laptop and your stolen money and fire me? I will fire you. I will sue you for everything you are worth. He turned to the man sitting to his left. It was Thomas Wright, the chief operating officer. Thomas was a heavy-set man who had been Harlan's right hand for 15 years. He looked pale, sweating profusely in the cool room. Thomas, Harlan barked. Tell them about the Kentucky project. Tell them that the delays were due to supplier issues. Tell them that we followed every safety protocol in the book. Back me up. Thomas Wright looked at Harlan. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at the black binder sitting on the table. He knew what was in it. He knew because he was the one who had received the handwritten memo from Harlan ordering him to cut corners. He knew that if he lied now, and I released that memo, he would be the one going to prison for criminal negligence. Thomas stood up slowly. His legs seemed shaky. Thomas? Harlan asked, his voice losing some of its volume. What are you doing? I can't do it. Harlan, Thomas said. His voice was quiet, trembling. I can't lie for you anymore. What did you say? Harlan hissed. Thomas looked at the board. The Kentucky outage wasn't the weather, and it wasn't a supplier issue. We were running the turbines at critical capacity because Harlan wanted to boost the Q3 numbers before the bond issuance. I told him it was dangerous. I told him the sensors were redlining. Shut up, Harlan screamed. You incompetent fool! Shut up! He ordered me to override the safety shuts. Thomas continued, his voice gaining strength. He sent me a memo. He said he didn't care about the safety margins. He said to blame the weather if anything broke. A gasp went around the room. This wasn't just mismanagement. This was a confession of a crime. He is lying, Harlan shouted, looking wildly around the table. He is trying to save his own skin. She got to him. She bribed him. I didn't bribe him. Harlan, I said softly. I just offered him the one thing you never did, a chance to tell the truth. Harlan looked at the faces around the table. They were looking at him with horror. The veil was torn. They saw the monster beneath the suit. Desperation seized him. He realized the business arguments were lost. He realized the legal arguments were lost. He had only one card left, the card he had played at the dinner table, the card he thought was unbreakable. Family. He turned to Caleb. Caleb was sitting still, his hands clasped on the table. He was looking at his father with an expression of profound sadness. Caleb, Harlan said. His voice changed. It became wheedling, intimate. Son, stand up, Caleb didn't move. "Stand up," Harlan commanded. "Tell these people who you are. You are a Kingswell. This is your legacy. This woman, she is trying to steal your birthright. She is trying to steal the chair that belongs to you." Harlan reached out and grabbed Caleb's shoulder. "She is the enemy. Caleb, she humiliated us. She is attacking your family. Tell them. Tell them that we stand together. Tell them that blood is thicker than water." The room held its breath. All eyes turned to the son, the golden boy, the man who had stayed silent at the dinner table. Caleb slowly pushed his father's hand off his shoulder. He stood up. He looked at me. Then he looked at his father. "I am a Kingswell," Caleb said. His voice was shaky at first, but it steadied as he spoke. "That is my name, but for 35 years, I thought that name meant something honorable. I thought it meant we were builders." "We are builders," Harlan insisted. "We built this country." "No," Caleb said. "You built a monument to yourself, and you used everyone around you as bricks." "How dare you?" Harlan whispered. "After everything I gave you." "You didn't give me anything, Dad," Caleb said. "You loaned it to me, and you charged interest. You used my trust fund to cover your bad bets. You used my engagement to try and acquire technology. You used my silence to cover your crimes." "I did it for you," Harlan shouted. "To protect your future." "My future?" Caleb laughed. A sad, broken sound. "You destroyed my future the night you called Addison trash. You showed me that to you. People are just things to be used or thrown away." Caleb took a deep breath. He looked at the board members. "I am the son of Harlan Kingswell," Caleb said clearly. "But I am not his shield. And I am not his excuse. He did this. He broke the company. He broke the laws. And he broke his family." Caleb looked down at his father. "She isn't stealing the company, Dad. She is the only reason there is anything left to save." Harlan stared at his son. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The betrayal was absolute. The son he had molded, the son he had bullied, the son he had owned, had just cut the strings. I stepped forward. I placed a single sheet of paper on the table in front of Harlan. "The resolution is drafted," I said. "It is a voluntary resignation. Citing health reasons, you keep your pension, you keep the house, you walk out of here, and you never come back." Harlan looked at the paper. Then he looked up at me. His eyes were full of hate, a pure, distilled toxicity. "And if I don't sign?" he snarled. "Then I open the binder," I said. "I release the memo Thomas just described to the Department of Justice. I release the evidence of the shell companies to the SEC. We restructure the debt in bankruptcy court. You lose the pension, you lose the house, and you spend the rest of your life in a federal prison cell." I leaned in close, so only he could hear the steel in my voice. "Those are your options. Harlan, the exit door, or the trap door. Choose." Harlan looked at the binder. He looked at Thomas Wright, who was staring at the floor. He looked at Caleb, who had turned his back on him. He looked at the board members, who were waiting for him to bleed. He picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He slashed his signature across the bottom of the page. It wasn't writing. It was a scar. He threw the pen down. It bounced off the walnut table and skittered onto the floor. "You think you have won," Harlan spat. Standing up, he grabbed his briefcase. "You think you can sit in my chair? You are nothing. You are a usurper. You will fail. And when you do, I will be there to laugh." He walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the brass handle. He turned back to look at me one last time. "I will drag you down," he said, his voice trembling with rage. "I will spend every cent I have left to drag you into the mud with me. Addison, you will never be clean of this." I looked at him. I stood at the head of the table, the place where he had ruled for 40 years. I looked at the man who had tried to make me feel small, and I saw how tiny he really was. You can try, Harlan, I said. But you are standing in the mud alone. He slammed the door behind him. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Then, silence returned. But it wasn't the heavy, fearful silence of before. It was the silence of a vacuum, waiting to be filled. Arthur Penhaligon cleared his throat. Well, he said, looking at the empty chair at the head of the table, I move that we accept the resignation of Harlan Kingswell and appoint Addison Watson as interim CEO to oversee the restructuring. Do I have a second? Second, Beverly said immediately. All in favor? 12 hands went up. Motion carried, Arthur said. He looked at me. The chair is yours, Ms. Watson. I walked to the head of the table. I didn't sit down. Not yet. I looked at Caleb. He gave me a small, tired nod, and then he turned and walked out the side door. He was free. I placed my hands on the walnut table. It felt cold, solid. Thank you, I said to the board. Now, let's get to work. We have a company to save. Harlan Kingswell did not go quietly into the night. He went on to the morning news programs, 48 hours after he had signed his resignation letter in the boardroom. I stood in the media center at North Glass Systems and watched him on a wall of monitors. He was standing on the steps of the Kingswell Foundation Library, a neoclassical building he had funded 10 years ago to launder his reputation. He looked weary but dignified, playing the role of the martyred patriarch to perfection. It is a tragedy, Harlan said to the bank of microphones, his voice thick with rehearsed emotion. I stepped down because my health could no longer sustain the fight against these predatory attacks. But let me be clear, the values of Kingswell infrastructure are under siege. This hostile takeover by North Glass Systems is not a merger, it is a looting. He paused, wiping a non-existent tear from his eye. I have always put my employees first, he lied, without a tremor in his voice. I have always put the community first, and now, to prove my commitment, I am pledging $5 million of my personal fortune to the Displaced Workers Fund, to help the thousands of loyal employees who will inevitably be fired when Ms. Watson dismantles this company for spare parts. It was a masterstroke of manipulation. He was painting me as the villain before I had even printed new business cards. He was turning the public narrative from Harlan the fraud to Harlan the victim. He is good, Derek Sloan admitted, crossing his arms. The stock is wobbling again. The retail investors are panicking. They think you are going to liquidate the workforce. He is banking on the fact that I cannot fight him in the mud without getting dirty, I said, watching Harlan shake hands with a weeping woman who was likely a paid actor. He wants me to hold a press conference and call him a liar. He wants a screaming match. If we don't respond, we look guilty, Gwen Holloway warned. The union representatives are already calling. They are spooked. We will respond, I said, turning away from the screens. But not with a microphone. We will respond with math. I walked back to my desk. Release the restructuring packet, I ordered. The full version, not the summary. I want every single employee at Kingswell to see the numbers. The transparency files? Derek asked. Addison, nobody releases that level of detail during a takeover. It shows our margins. It exposes our strategy. Release it, I said. Show them the pension guarantee. Show them the salary protection clause. Show them the comparison between Harlan's executive bonuses over the last 10 years and the stagnant wages of the line workers. Let them do the math on who has actually been looting the company. We hit send at noon. By 2 o'clock, the narrative began to fracture. It didn't shift all at once, but the cracks appeared. A labor union leader tweeted a screenshot of our guaranteed employment contract with the caption, "Finally, a contract that doesn't require a lawyer to understand." A financial blogger broke down Harlan's charitable pledge and pointed out that $5 million was less than 1% of the golden parachute he had tried to negotiate for himself. The public began to see what I saw. Harlan wasn't a philanthropist. He was a man throwing coins at the people he had been robbing for decades. At 4 o'clock, my private line rang. It was not a number I recognized. but the area code was from the Cayman Islands. I picked up. "You are stubborn," Harlan's voice came through, devoid of the grandfatherly warmth he had used on television. "I will give you that. You are stubborn. And you are repetitive." "Harlan," I said, "I thought we said our goodbyes in Georgia." "I am making you an offer," he said. "One time only. I have friends on the Regulatory Commission. I have friends in the Senate. I can make this acquisition drag on for 3 years. I can bleed you until Northglass is nothing but a memory. Or, he lowered his voice, you walk away, you keep the debt. I will pay it back with 10% interest over 2 years. I will give you a seat on the board, a real seat, and I will pay you a consulting fee of $20 million to advise on the transition. You get rich, you get your victory lap, and I get my company back." It was a bribe, a massive, blatant bribe wrapped in the guise of a settlement. "And the apology?" I asked. "The private apology you promised?" "I will say whatever you want me to say. Addison, in private, I will tell you that you are brilliant. I will tell you that you are worthy. Just sign the papers and go away." I looked out the window at the city. I thought about the $20 million. It was a fortune. It was enough to fund Northglass for a decade. "You still don't understand," I said softly. "You think this is about my ego. You think I am doing this because I need you to tell me I am good enough." "Everyone has a price," Harlan sneered. "I am sure they do," I said. "But I do not sell respect, Harlan, and I certainly do not sell it to men who think they can buy it back after they threw it away." I hung up. 30 minutes later, Vivian Kingswell walked into my office. She didn't knock. She looked pale. Her usual armor of indifference cracked. She was holding her phone. "He knows," she said. "Knows what?" "He knows I gave you the recording. He knows I helped you." She sat down on the sofa, her hands shaking as she lit a cigarette. I didn't tell her to put it out. "He called me," she said. "He told me I was out of the will. He told me I was no longer a Kingswell. He said he was going to burn the foundation to the ground just so I wouldn't have a job." "He is lashing out," I said. "He is a wounded animal." "He is dangerous," Vivian corrected. "And you need to finish him. Today, before he finds a way to blow up the vote tomorrow." She unlocked her phone and slid it across the desk. "There is more," she said. "On the tape. The dinner recording." I heard it. "Vivian, I heard him call me trash." "No," she said. "You stopped listening after you walked out. You didn't hear what he said to Senator Miller 5 minutes later." I picked up the phone and pressed play. I held the speaker to my ear. I heard the clinking of glasses. I heard the low hum of conversation resuming after my dramatic exit. And then, I heard Harlan's voice, drop to a conspiratorial whisper. "Let her have her little tantrum. It works in our favor. We will let the wedding proceed, and once she signs the prenuptial, we will acquire Northglass as a marital asset. We merge the IP, strip the patents for the new grid project, and then dissolve the marriage. The company will be swallowed whole. It won't matter who she is or what she built. By the time she realizes it, she will be walking away with nothing but alimony." My blood ran cold. It wasn't just prejudice. It wasn't just that he didn't like my background. It was premeditated corporate theft. He had planned the marriage as a hostile takeover from the beginning. He was going to use Caleb, his own son, as a Trojan horse to steal my life's work. "He never intended to let you in," Vivian said quietly. "He intended to eat you." I looked at Gwen, who had entered the room and heard the recording. Her face was white. "That is conspiracy," Gwen said. "That is conspiracy to commit fraud. If he discussed this with a senator, Addison, this invalidates every defense he has. He wasn't protecting the family. He was planning a robbery. And there is something else," Gwen said, placing a file on my desk. "I dug into the bylaws he is trying to use to block the vote tomorrow. He is claiming that the emergency session wasn't properly noticed." "We sent the notice 24 hours in advance," I said. "It is legal, yes, but he is trying to invoke a supermajority clause from 1998, Gwen explained. It requires 80% shareholder approval to remove a chairman who is also a founder. He thinks he is safe because he still controls 25% of the voting stock through his personal holdings. I looked at the math. If Harlan voted his 25% against the acquisition, and he convinced just one or two of his old cronies to abstain, we wouldn't hit the 80% threshold. The deal would die. He would survive. He is going to block it, I said. He is going to sit in that meeting tomorrow and vote no and legally. There is nothing we can do. Unless, Gwen said, he is stripped of his voting rights for cause. How? Breach of fiduciary duty, Gwen said. If a director acts in bad faith against the interests of the shareholders, the board can suspend his voting privileges. The tape proves bad faith. He was willing to sabotage a merger for personal gain. But we need to serve him with the suspension notice before the meeting starts. I stood up. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the office. Draft the notice, I said, and add an ultimatum. What ultimatum? He signs the final separation agreement tonight, I said. He sells his 25% stake to the employee ownership pool at fair market value. He walks away completely, if he does that. We seal the tape. We don't release the conversation about the senator. We let him keep his freedom. And if he refuses? Then we play the tape in the boardroom tomorrow morning, I said. And the senator goes down with him. I sent the ultimatum via courier to his estate. At 9 o'clock that night, my phone rang. It wasn't Harlan. It was Caleb. Addison? He sounded terrified. Caleb, where are you? I am at a motel off the interstate, he said. I didn't go to the hotel you said. I was afraid he would find me. Did he call you? Yes, Caleb whispered. He was screaming. He wasn't making sense. He said I had to choose. He said, if you choose that woman, you are dead. Not dead to him, Addison. He said dead, like he meant it. He is trying to scare you, I said, gripping the phone tight. He is losing power. Caleb, fear is the only tool he has left. He said he would destroy me, Caleb sobbed. He said he would plant drugs in my car. He said he would ruin my life. Listen to me, I said, my voice fierce. He cannot touch you. You are free. Do not answer his calls. Do not read his texts. Turn off your phone. Caleb, go to sleep. Tomorrow. This ends. Are you sure? I promise, I said. Tomorrow. He becomes history. Caleb hung up. I stood alone in my office. The cleaners had gone home. The war room was empty, save for the hum of the servers. I walked to the window and looked down at the city. It was a grid of lights, a network of connections that I understood better than anyone. I thought about the table Harlan said I didn't belong at. For years, I had thought the goal was to get a seat, to be invited, to be accepted. I had polished my manners, hidden my background, and tried to shrink myself to fit into their world. I realize now that was a mistake. The table wasn't a prize. It was a weapon. The people sitting there weren't better. They were just the ones holding the handle. And tomorrow, I wasn't just going to sit there. I was going to break the legs off the table and build something new. I checked the time. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. I needed to sleep. The vote was scheduled for 9 o'clock. I lay down on the sofa in my office, pulling my blazer over me like a blanket. I drifted into a restless sleep, dreaming of wires and breaking glass. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing against the coffee table. I blinked, disoriented. The office was dark. The city lights were still on. I checked the time. 2:17 in the morning. The notification was an email. High priority. Red flag. It was from the corporate secretary of Kingswell Infrastructure. Subject: urgent change of schedule. Extraordinary general meeting. Dear directors and shareholders, due to unforeseen security concerns raised by the chairman, the time of the extraordinary general meeting has been advanced. The session will now commence at 7 o'clock a.m. sharp. Doors will seal at 7:15 a.m. No remote attendance will be permitted. I sat up, the blazer falling to the floor. 7 o'clock. Harlan knew we needed time to file the suspension notice. He knew we needed to get a judge to sign off on the breach of fiduciary duty. He was moving the goalposts while we slept. He was trying to hold the vote before the courts opened. He was trying to force the rejection of the deal before I could legally strip his voting rights. "He is trying to ambush us," I whispered to the empty room. I hit the speed dial for Gwen. She answered on the first ring. "I saw it," she said, her voice groggy but sharp. "He is pulling a fast one. If he holds the vote at 7, we can't get the injunction in time. He will use his 25% to block the deal." "Where are you?" I asked, grabbing my shoes. "I am getting dressed. I will meet you at the car." "Call Derek," I said. "Call Vivian. Call everyone." "Addison," Gwen said. "We don't have the court order. If we walk into that room at 7 without the injunction, he still has his votes. We can't stop him." I walked to the window, looking toward the east where the sun would rise in a few hours. "We don't need a court order," I said. "We have the truth, and this time I am not going to whisper it." "What are you going to do?" "I am going to crash the party," I said. "Meet me in the lobby in 20 minutes. And Gwen, bring the full recording." I hung up and looked at my reflection in the glass. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. Harlan Kingswell wanted a fight in the dark. He wanted to steal the company back before the world woke up. He was about to find out that I did my best work in the dark. The hallway outside the boardroom on the top floor of Kingswell headquarters was a physical crush of bodies and noise. It was 6:55 in the morning. The sun had barely crested the horizon, painting the savannah sky in bruised purples and oranges. But inside, the artificial lights were harsh and unforgiving. Harlan had tried to keep the time change quiet, but secrets in a crumbling empire have a way of leaking. The press had smelled blood. Reporters were jostling with security guards near the elevators. Analysts were shouting into phones. The air smelled of stale coffee and impending violence. I did not stop for questions. I walked through the crowd with Gwen Holloway on my left and Derek Sloan on my right. We moved as a phalanx. Gwen carried the legal accordion file. Derek carried the financial restructuring agreement. I carried nothing but the small USB drive in my pocket. We reached the double doors. 2 security guards I did not recognize blocked the path. "Closed session," one of them grunted. "Shareholders and directors only. No exceptions." "I am the majority creditor," I said, not slowing down. "And I hold 8% of the voting stock by proxy. If you do not open this door in 3 seconds, you will be named as co-defendants in a federal obstruction of justice lawsuit." The guard looked at me. He looked at the determination in my eyes. He stepped aside. I pushed the doors open. The room was already full. Harlan had packed it. He had summoned every friendly face, every sycophant, and every silent partner he could find on short notice. He sat at the head of the table, looking energized, manic even. He thought he had outmaneuvered us. He thought that by holding the vote before the courts opened, he could force the board to reject the Northglass acquisition and cement his control. He looked up as I entered. His smile was a baring of teeth. "You are trespassing," Harlan announced. "This is a private meeting of the Kingswell board." "It is a shareholders' meeting." "Harlan," I said, walking to the foot of the table. The room was so crowded that people were standing against the walls. "And I am a shareholder." "You are a disruption," Harlan shouted. Standing up, "I call for order. I move to have this woman removed by security immediately so we can proceed with the vote to reject the hostile bid." "Seconded," shouted a man near the window. One of Harlan's old golf cronies. "I have a point of order," Arthur Penhaligon said, his voice cutting through the noise. He remained seated, calm amidst the chaos. "We cannot vote on the bid until we address the motion of leadership review." "There is no leadership review." Harlan slammed his hand on the table. "I am the chairman. I set the agenda, and the agenda is to crush this vendetta. That is all this is. A personal vendetta by a woman who is angry that she wasn't good enough to marry into this family." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "She is willing to destroy your investments, your pensions, And this company just to get back at me for a rude comment at a dinner party. Are you going to let a scorned woman dictate our future?" The room murmured. It was his best defense. Paint me as emotional. Paint me as irrational. I did not shout back. I did not defend myself. I looked at Arthur. Arthur looked back at Harlan. "Harlan," Arthur said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "She didn't make this personal. You did. You made it personal the moment you decided that your ego was worth more than the solvency of this firm. You are a traitor, Arthur." Harlan spat. "I will deal with you later. Now, call the vote. All in favor of rejecting the Northglass proposal?" Harlan raised his hand. His cronies raised their hands. It was close. Too close. If they voted now, before the evidence was presented, he might just have the numbers to deadlock the deal. "Before you count those hands," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room, "I believe the board should hear the supplementary due diligence materials." "We don't have time for reading," Harlan yelled. "The market opens in 2 hours." "We don't need to read," I said. "We just need to listen." I pulled the USB drive from my pocket. I plugged it into the teleconference hub in the center of the table. "This is not just a recording of an insult," I said to the room. "This is a recording of a conspiracy to commit securities fraud." "Stop her!" Harlan screamed. He lunged toward the center of the table, scrambling to grab the device. "Security! Cut the power!" But it was too late. I hit the spacebar. The audio boomed through the overhead speakers. It wasn't the trash comment. It was the conversation that happened 5 minutes later. The conversation Harlan had with Senator Miller. The voice was unmistakable. It was Harlan, laughing, arrogant, and careless. "Let her have her little tantrum," Harlan's voice said, laughing like it was all a game. "It works in our favor." Then he spelled out the rest. "Let the wedding proceed. Get my signature on the prenup. Pull Northglass into the marriage. Merge the IP. Strip the grid project patents. And dissolve the marriage once the company was hollowed out, leaving me with nothing but alimony." The silence that followed was absolute. It was one thing to be a tough businessman. It was another thing entirely to be a predator who planned to loot his own daughter-in-law's company through a fraudulent marriage. Harlan stood frozen. The color drained from his face until he looked like gray ash. I wasn't done. "Gwen," I said. Gwen Holloway stepped forward and placed a stack of papers on the table. "These are the transaction records for Apex Logistics," Gwen announced. "The shell company owned by Harlan's personal estate attorney. These records show $40 million of company funds being siphoned off to offshore accounts and then loaned back to the company to artificially inflate revenue. This is self-dealing. This is embezzlement, and we have already drafted the submission to the Securities and Exchange Commission." I looked at the board members. I looked at the cronies who had their hands raised a moment ago. Their hands were down now. They were looking at Harlan with the expression of men who were realizing they were standing next to a radioactive isotope. "You have a choice," I said. "You can vote with him and be named as co-conspirators in the federal indictment that will be filed by noon. Or you can vote to remove him for cause, right now, and save the company." Harlan looked around the room. He looked for an ally. He looked for a friend. He found only eyes that were turning away. "It is a lie," Harlan whispered, but the fight was gone. He sounded small. "It is all a trick." Arthur Penhaligon stood up. "I move to remove Harlan Kingswell as chairman and CEO immediately," Arthur said. "For cause, for breach of fiduciary duty, and for gross misconduct." "Second," said the woman from logistics. "All in favor?" Every hand in the room went up, even the cronies, even the men who had played golf with him for 30 years. Survival is a powerful instinct, and Harlan was dead weight. "Motion carried," Arthur said. Unanimously, Arthur turned to Harlan. "You are fired. Harlan, effective immediately. Your access to the building is revoked. Your company car is recalled. And regarding your severance package..." Arthur paused, glancing at the self-dealing documents. "The board votes to deny all severance and stock options due to criminal malfeasance." Harlan stood there. stripped naked in front of the people he had ruled. He had lost his title. He had lost his money. He had lost his reputation. "You can't do this," Harlan stammered. "I am Kingswell." "Not anymore," I said. I walked to the head of the table. I placed the restructuring agreement on the walnut surface. I took a pen from my pocket, a cheap, plastic pen from my office, not a gold fountain pen. "This is the agreement," I said to the board. "Sterling Capital injects $400 million today. We guarantee the pension fund. We guarantee no operational layoffs for 12 months, and North Glass Systems assumes majority control of the board." I signed my name. The scratch of the pen was the only sound in the room. "It is done," I said. I looked at Harlan. "Security," I called out. Marcus, my head of security who had flown down with us, stepped forward. He wasn't smiling. "Escort Mr. Kingswell from the building," I ordered. Harlan straightened his jacket. He tried to summon one last shred of dignity. He turned toward the main double doors, the grand exit. "Not that way," I said. Harlan stopped. He turned to look at me. "The press is in the lobby." "Harlan," I said, "I imagine you don't want to explain why you were just fired for fraud on live television. And frankly, I don't want your face associated with my company for 1 second longer than necessary." I pointed to the far corner of the room, to a discreet, gray metal door. "Use the service elevator," I said. Harlan stared at the door. It was the elevator used by the cleaning staff. The elevator used to take out the trash. The irony hit him like a physical blow. He looked at me, his eyes burning with a hate that would likely consume him for the rest of his short, miserable life. "You think you have won," he hissed, "but you will never belong here." "I don't need to belong to your club." "Harlan," I said, "I just bought the clubhouse. Now get out." He walked to the service door. He opened it. He stepped into the gray, unpainted corridor. The door clicked shut behind him. Harlan Kingswell was gone. A collective breath seemed to leave the room. The tension broke. I walked out to the main floor. The employees were gathered there. Hundreds of them. They looked terrified. They had heard the rumors. They thought they were about to be fired. I climbed onto a desk. I didn't need a microphone. "My name is Addison Watson," I said. "And as of 5 minutes ago, I am the new owner of this company." The silence was fearful. "Harlan Kingswell is gone," I continued. "His executives are gone, but you are not." I held up the agreement. "I have signed a guarantee," I said. "No layoffs for operational staff. Your pensions are safe. Your healthcare is safe. We are going to rebuild this grid. We are going to stop cutting corners. And we are going to treat the people who actually do the work with the respect they deserve." For a second, nobody moved. Then, a woman in the back, a middle-aged woman wearing a Kingswell polo shirt, started to clap. Then a man next to her. Then the whole floor erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was the sound of people who had been holding their breath for years finally being allowed to exhale. I stepped down. As the crowd dispersed, I saw a figure standing near the wall. It was Caleb. He was wearing jeans and a button-down shirt. He looked like he had slept in his car, which he probably had. He held a cardboard box in his hands. He walked over to me. "I heard," he said. "I heard what happened. It is over." "Caleb," I said. "I know," he said. He looked around the office. "I gave the keys to my company car to security. I gave my access badge to Arthur. I have nothing left." "You have your freedom," I said. "That is worth more than the car." "I want to work," he said. "I don't mean a fake job. I don't mean a title. I mean, I want to learn. I want to know how to build something, the way you did. I don't want to be a Kingswell anymore. I just want to be useful." I looked at him. I saw the sincerity in his eyes. He was broken. Yes, but sometimes you have to break a bone to reset it correctly. "I am not going to give you a job. Caleb," I said, "I am not doing favors. I know. But," I said, "North Glass has an entry-level opening in the logistics department. It pays $45,000 a year. You answer phones. You track shipments. You report to a manager named Sarah who is 24 years old and will not care who your father was. Caleb swallowed. It was a humiliating drop from the boardroom. I'll take it, he said. Apply online, I said. If you are qualified, Sarah will call you. He nodded. He smiled. A genuine, small smile. Thank you, Addison. Don't thank me, I said. Earn it. He turned and walked toward the exit. Not as a prince, but as an applicant. I turned back to the boardroom. The room was empty now. The mess of papers was still on the table. The portrait of Harlan Kingswell still hung on the wall, looking down with arrogant eyes. Marcus, I said to my security chief. Yes, boss? Take that painting down, I said, and put it in the trash. I walked to the head of the table. I ran my hand along the smooth wood. I thought about the dinner. I thought about the humiliation. I thought about the girl from Detroit who was told she didn't belong. I sat down in the chair at the head of the table. It was just a chair. It was just wood and leather, but the view from here was different. I looked out the window at the city I now powered. I didn't ask for a seat, I whispered to the empty room. I bought the table, and I cleaned it. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Addison and her fight for justice. Where are you listening from today? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts on the ending. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel Lucy Revenge Stories, hit the like button, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.